Let's take you now live to the Anti-Corruption Agency stakeholder dialogue on the topic election and anti-corruption. The key focus is what is next on government's agenda. Let's listen in.
Objectives, namely, to raise citizen awareness of their role in safeguarding electoral integrity and promoting political accountability. Secondly, we sought to enhance the engagement that drives demand-side accountability in the 2024 elections and beyond. And the third objective seeks to secure long-term commitments from political parties and flag bearers to fight corruption and sustain Ghana's increased transparency and accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, it is in the furtherance of the third objective that we are gathered here today, to secure the commitments of political parties and ensure that they are mainstreaming anti-corruption issues in their political manifestos and the agenda. Why are we doing this? We have a background of Ghana's poor performance on the global corruption indicators, particularly the Corruption Perception Index that is done annually by the Transparency International. Over the years, we have seen stagnation in the scores of Ghana since 2020, indicating that the country is not making progress in its fight against corruption. Additionally, the IMF's last report on Ghana noted that while governance indicators were relatively strong compared to some of our peers, governance effectiveness is a challenge. Regulatory quality and control of corruption had deteriorated over the last 10 years. This has further compounded these challenges because we also have issues of weak public accountability and also citizen engagement in policy formulation, especially in budget planning and implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, recently, the 2023 round of the Open Budget Survey, Ghana scored 17 out of 100 in public participation in budgeting, which is not helpful. Again, a work by Etuahini Eje and Frimpong has also shown that Ghana's economic challenges or debt crisis are as a result of endemic corruption prevailing in the public sector. Quite strangely, ladies and gentlemen, corruption and the fight against it does not show explicitly in the election conversations as Ghana nears another election on 7 December 2024. This is evidenced in two ways. First, political party manifestos neither have an abundance of anti-corruption commitments, nor are commitments given prominence. The major political parties have a total of 32 anti-corruption commitments scattered in their manifestos. Ladies and gentlemen, out of the 32 commitments, only 4 are about enforcing or deploying existing anti-corruption legislation. This, therefore, makes it difficult for us to see how elections and anti-corruption issues are being integrated. Additionally, we have also cited the work by NCC, and it has listed education, employment, health, roads, and infrastructure and the economy as the top 5 ranked issues of concern towards the elections. Sources. Listen, because if corruption is not addressed, it means that Ghana's development will be affected. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not seek to only drive up the issue of corruption in the election conversation, but we also want to secure commitments from the political parties and their flag bearers. As part of today's activities, we will examine the political party manifestos and promises on anti-corruption, and will lay out what we expect of these political parties and document their commitments to help us to hold them accountable to the campaign promises. The responsibility of securing a corruption-free Ghana is not limited to any one party. It is a shared duty that requires the active engagement of all stakeholders present. It is our expectation, ladies and gentlemen, that today's meeting will begin a fruitful process of moving forward together with a shared purpose of making leaders accountable to us through the commitment they make in their policy statements, and also ensure that citizens' voices are captured and implemented. As it is said, we can only do as much alone, but together as Ghanaians who are committed, we'll be able to do great exploits. I thank you once again for joining us today. I indulge you to engage fully and discuss openly and work collaboratively toward building an anti-corruption agenda that will hold strong through this election and beyond. And it is our prayer that today's discussion will lay the groundwork for meaningful change in our beloved country, Ghana. Once again, thank you for coming.
Thank you once again, the Executive Director for the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, Beauty, Emefa Nate. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge our partners and those who are making this possible, the Pledge Against Corruption campaign. We have the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, we have the Ghana Integrity Initiative, the Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP, we have Imani, we have the Media Foundation for West Africa, the Natural Resource Governance Institute, we have the UK Aid, we have the Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, and of course we have you, and you. I must say also that we are live on the Joy News channel. We are live on Channel 1, also live on all our social media platforms, the Pledge Against Corruption Ghana social media platforms. So wherever you are, you can share and share and share. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of a number of representatives for state agencies in this country. We have the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Mr. Samedako is here. Thank you so much for coming. We also have a rep from the Financial Intelligence Center. We have a representative from SHRAJ. We have a representative from the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. The National Peace Council is here. And of course, representatives from the NPP, the NDC, the Movement for Change. We have GUM, the Ghana Union Movement. We have the CPP, the APC, and the New Force. Of course, we'll be introducing them shortly as they come as well. And then I would also want to acknowledge the presence of Sent Ghana, the CSO's platform on SDGs, the Tax Justice Coalition, and of course, the UNDP. Thank you so much for making this possible. At this point, I'd like to welcome Ms. Clara Osei-Boateng, Governance Advisor for the FCDO, for a brief remark. Please give her a round of applause as she comes.
Thank you very much, MFA. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Permit me to stand on the protocols established by Mrs. Nate and just share my brief comments. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this event, Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition and their partners, Africa Center for Energy Policy and Ghana Integrity Initiative. The UK believes that the fight against corruption is essential to global progress. As noted in our 2023 government white paper on international development, corruption and illicit financial flows can undermine any government's ability to deliver services and public investments necessary for long-term development. Corruption reinforces geographical risk, finance violent conflicts, and undermine democratic and rule-based societies. Illicit financial flows enables activities of organized crime groups and terrorist organizations which entrench instability, damage the environment, plunder natural resources, and hinder development objectives. Corruption affects all of us. No jurisdiction in this world is immune. It is an issue that needs to be addressed through partnership. This is why the UK is delighted to partner civil society organizations in Ghana like GACC, GII, ASEP, Imani, CDD, and others to raise awareness, but importantly to mobilize citizens to demand commitments from those seeking office, to establish and to explain themselves policies that they have in place when they are voted into power to deal with corruption. The UK believes that civil society organizations with their local knowledge and expertise in policy development are well placed to bring to the attention of the Ghanaian voter the commitment political parties are making in respect of corruption during this election to enable them make informed decisions, but importantly, to also enable them to hold them to account after the elections. Our discussions and dialogues about corruption should not end here, but most importantly, to empower civil society to ask the relevant questions after the elections to hold the government in power to account. This is why we have committed over £7 million through our Ghana Governance Program and the serious and organized crime programs for the next 5 years to support credible elections and anti-corruption initiatives in Ghana. So aside our civil society support, we are also providing technical assistance, or we are offering technical assistance to state institutions who require them. Again, we are also bringing the whole of UK government approach, including working with international partners on intelligence, supporting investigations into corrupt practices and asset recovery. We want to make it harder to move illicit funds between jurisdictions and make it even more likely that the corrupt will face justice and stolen assets will be recovered. We believe today's event, as Mrs. Nate mentioned, is just one of those activities they are enrolling to ensure that Ghanaian voters and Ghanaian citizens at large are well informed about the ills of corruption and make demands on our political parties, even as we approach December 7 elections, so that they are clear in their minds which of them is offering the best solution to address the menace. So on this note, we wish you well and fruitful deliberations, and do hope that this will not end in this room, but will be taken to our rural areas and places which are hard to reach. Those are the people who do not understand the big grammars we are here speaking, but you'll be able to break it down for them so that they can make informed decisions and informed choices come December 7th. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and we hope it will be a success.
Thank you so much, Clara. We are grateful. At this point, I'd like to also acknowledge the presence of and representation from the Ghana Bar Association, the Office of the Chief Imam, the Natural Resource Governance Institute. We also have a rep from the World Bank. We also have representatives from the National Youth Authority, the Judicial Service, and the Economic and Organized Crime Office, EOCO. We'll get straight into action and try to answer the question, elections and anti-corruption, what is the next government's agenda? And to start off, I'd like to now welcome our expert panel for the first part of the discussion. Then we'll also get into the second part after that, where the political parties' representatives will let us in on what exactly the next government will do when it comes to addressing the issue of corruption, how they hope to tackle it, and what exactly is contained in their manifesto, and what will be different is what we are hoping to hear. So to start off, I'd like to welcome the Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, Mrs. Mary Ada. Please welcome her with a round of applause. We also have the founding president and CEO, Imani, Mr. Franklin Kujo, is also with us. And then I also like to welcome the Executive Director, West Africa Civil Society Institute, WASI, Dr. Nana Asantua Afajino. And I saved the best for the last because it's his birthday. Mr. David Ofosu-Dote, founder and senior partner, AB and David Africa. You should give him a birthday clap. So for obvious reasons, I would like to start with you, Mr. David Ofosu-Dote. I'm sure because it's your day. But really, first off, what would you say should be different, or what exactly your expectations are when it comes to dealing with corruption?
I think my expectations are actually what is not in the manifesto. So I don't pay too much attention to what is in the manifesto concerning corruption, because we are noted over the years as a people who don't mean what we write. And we do the things, we only write it just because we want to win elections. So I'm not surprised that you have so many promises and little emphasis on there. But what I expect is the things they say. I think they should talk more about corruption and how they will fight corruption. Because the more they talk about it, the more that the public is conscientized as to what it is that they intend to do. The other thing that I think will be important is for them to demonstrate how they will deal with the corruption that will occur within their regime. Because we are very good at dealing with corruption when we are not in power. And or when we are not in power and we are criticizing those in power. Or when we are in power and we are dealing with those outside power. But the corruption often occurs when we are in power. And that's very important that we hear more about how they will deal with that. Because it will occur whilst they are in power. Yeah, and it always occurs. It's not by any particular political party. Very often when you have sessions like this, you will see that those who are in charge normally don't attend. It is those who are concerned about it who come and talk, and I don't know whether when they are far away they laugh at us or not. But somehow I'm sure they hear. It would have been good if you have them and you are interacting with them. So, and the reason I'm concerned about this is that a lot of the people who are following just because of corruption. That's the very reason why they want to come into power. I mean, or want to stay in power either way. So it's important we pay attention to exactly those things. I mean, lastly, I think as a people, we must also talk about the fact that we are not immune from this. We are part of it. If a person who is talking against corruption receives some amount of money or receives some particular business deal and it's good to him, then it's fine. It's only for some people is when they are not part of the deal that then they. So we lack a fair bit of principles, and I think it's important that we take the corruption fight beyond just the politicians and the manifestos into the private sector, because in the private sector there's a fair amount of corruption as well. If I'm in a private sector company and I'm giving a deal to somebody because the person is giving me some kickback, it is not different from the one in public sector. The only difference is that the public sector person is using my taxes to do that. And I think we need to pay a lot of attention to this, because it is part of the significant reasons why the economy is what it is. I mean, if you talk about inflation, and permit me for a second to talk about these two things. Talk about inflation and the dollar exchange. We underrate the extent to which corruption contributes to it. Because if a project is costing 10 cedis, and I'm doing it for 15 cedis because the politicians want it that way, I'm actually taking more money out of the system than is due. And I have a higher disposable income. And therefore I can spend that money. And that can cause inflation. Secondly, if I steal enough money and because government is changing, I need to take a lot out of the system, I will need to buy a lot of dollars and ship it out. So it does have an impact. And it is these things I expect us to talk about. As for the issues about we have passed laws, etc., I believe as the discussion go on, I will talk about it. The more laws we pass, the more the opportunity to cause the corruption. And
of course, we have political party representatives here, so definitely
I'm aware,
they will get to interact with us on it. Mrs. Nada, I know that the Ghana Integrity Initiative, you've done extensive work looking at the manifestos. David wants to hear outside what is not in the manifesto, but what is in the manifesto? Are there gaps? What you've seen in the manifesto so far, does it address the issue of corruption for you?
Thank you very much, MFA, and good morning to everyone here present. Thank you for coming. We see a lot of gaps in the manifestos that have been produced. Let's say we've done some assessments and we have looked at even the parties that have documented their policy statements, which we can refer to as proper manifestos policies. And so in those, you realize that out of the total, many of them are good enough. However, we have a lot of issues that have not been attended to. We say gaps because in the first place, we had opportunity to engage. And so in the engagement and consultations with the political parties offered opportunity to civil society to do, the result therein we were expecting was that the reflections of what came out would be as robust and also as practical and proactive as we wished. Unfortunately, we didn't see that happen. For instance, if you take an issue around the law, we have talked about fighting corruption being difficult because we are a common law country, and so the issue of the reverse burden of proof becomes very difficult. So he who alleges must prove, and that is a difficulty for us because we are very much mostly unable to uncover the needed documentation to support whatever complaints we are making. So it becomes difficult. We in the Ghana Integrity Initiative have a center that we use to facilitate corruption reporting and also complaints that come from whistleblowers. We work with other sectors to ensure that this is done. We see that it's a big challenge. citizens who are daring to report corruption have an issue because at the end of the day, they don't have enough evidence to support. So we spoke extensively to most of the political parties on this, that we need the law that supports this. So that if I say, for instance, Beauty is corrupt, Beauty, the public officer, has done something that needs to be investigated, we should not wait for her to give us all the evidence to support. And I remember the current president made that commitment as well sometime back, but that's water under the bridge for us now. That was not done. We see commitments to compile all the laws to get one document like it happens in other jurisdictions. That is fine. Again, the other gap is the fact that if you look at our law, sections 239 of the Criminal Offences Act and 240, as it defines corruption, it makes corruption or defines corruption wholly as what citizens see it: facilitation, bribery. We have issues around unexplained wealth, which we are grappling with. We see people who are cited, but then we are not able to investigate them because we do not have jurisdiction to do so under our current law. So that's another big gap which we need to work on. And as Mr. Fusidote has said, it's not about the law, it's about the quality of the law and the law being able to bite. If you look at all the manifestos, judging them by enforcement is only 4 commitments that speak to enforcing the manifesto commitments. We come again to the issue of asset declaration, which is the biggest when it comes to the issue of fighting corruption inexhaustively. All the political parties are willing to pass a law, but then we have what we call the Conduct of Public Officers Bill, which speaks to the issue of asset declaration, 1, 2, conflict of interest, and 3, gift policy. We know as a society, our context and culture has shown that we tend to place all the burden on the fact that Ghanaians are generous people, we are welcoming, we accept gifts, we give them. Unfortunately, we do not have a very good policy in place or criminalizing some behaviors, and so it's difficult. We have a bill which started going out in 2013, if I'm correct. In the last parliament, that's the 7th parliament, it went to parliament again, the Conduct of Public Officers Bill, which would have helped a lot in the fight against corruption. Unfortunately, we do not see that happen. Yeah. And everybody wants to pass an asset declaration law again, which is not robust, because we want to see verification and we also want to see publication. A public officer must be one who is transparent and accountable to the people who have put him there. Okay. Remember, the Constitution in Article 1 says, power resides in us, we the people. And we the people are giving that power back to representatives. And so those representatives, we believe, should not have any qualms about making their lives public, because we want to serve the public. Again, another gap in wrapping up, we have, so wrapping up, is there are so many, so we would share the document. Another area we believe is a serious area we need to pay attention to is the area of service delivery. Okay. And we have everybody, be it a child or a grown-up, procure services at one point or the other. But we see a lot of gaps in how we deliver services, and he attests to it that a businessman would want to facilitate his process, and so he would do quick wins here and there to be able to do that and capture some profit. We need to be able to have protocols that ensure that services that are being delivered are publicly available. The protocols around them are shared for everybody to know what is and what is not, what our requirements are, what are the processes. If I want to buy a land and register it, how do I do it? This would help. We say we are doing digitalization. Unfortunately, people do not understand this, And people who are thinking about bread and butter just want to go to the hospital or send their children to school. So these are some of the gaps we have identified. And we believe we should be, the political parties still have an opportunity to pay attention to them. Thank you.
It does appear there are a number of gaps that we've identified, but of course we've been launching a manifesto for some time now, and thankfully Mr. Kujo is with us. So Mr. Kujo, you've been looking at the manifestos. It was recently launched. Let me ask if they blew your mind this time, or it's still the same old story?
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Let me just start off, take off from the anti-corruption conversation. First of all, the manifestos, as we've seen them, none of them actually, in fact, most of them are vague on corruption, really. The manifestos, none of the manifestos critically address the drivers of corruption in Ghana, and that's sad. The parties mostly focus on building systems instead of addressing the process that lead to corruption. None of the manifestos target reforming the excessive control of the executive over the public procurement system. And indeed, the last one, none of the manifestos touch on leveraging the Office of Special Prosecutor to deepen the fight against corruption. Maybe there's a good reason for that, right? The Office of Special Prosecutor has recently said that what did he even say in Chi? I don't understand that, but essentially saying that he's done his best, whatever happens. It tells you that, look, if you want to fight corruption, we did an article, I think, January 2017, and said, look, fighting corruption and waste starts from the presidency. And the reason was simple. All these big procurement projects you hear about, SML, Carnegie VG, and I'll tell you a funny story about Carnegie VG. There's actually a deputy minister in this administration who called me at midnight and said, listen, Franklin, there's this contract between the finance minister and the communications minister. Cabinet even doesn't really know the details, but it's going to pass. So get it. And I got it at midnight, and we got to work. That's how come we got to know about Carnegie VG. The process was shambolic. The entire procurement process was an aberration, really. And I thought that one of the things that I really suspected from my good friend Ursula and then Ken, and they rammed through this whole thing. As we speak, Carnegie VG was supposed to do what? Catch telecom thieves, essentially telecom revenue thieves. The idea was that telecommunication companies were stealing revenues. So there was a need to monitor them. That contract was $176 million. As we speak, we've been paying $1.5 million every month since 2018. You've not seen a single report of how many telecom thieves have been caught, how much money have been saved to the state, and why we should continue paying that reclusive entity, private sector actor, $1.5 million every month. Right? Talk about SML. I mean, SML is another matter. I mean, I just don't understand. Now, there's a new form of corruption, really. We call it the state capture through private sector actors. Of course, Carnegie VG is one of them, and then, of course, SML is also one of them. But there's some sort of justification, to borrow my colleagues Bryce Simmons' term, that we are enchanted because the processes or the project that these things go to support seem to be overly good. So the national ID card is a wonderful project. Why would you want to question why you are receiving cards for free? What's the point? I mean, if India did it for less than $1, 600 million people have been put onto the national ID card. Why are we paying so much for the national ID card? That's the question we asked. Now, take it from me. I was one of those who actually supported through being a member of the Danish Business Sounding Board, Private Sector Board. We actually somehow blessed that project when through Danida. Some part of the money that went to my good friend Moses Bading. Moses is a good friend, yes, but I still have to ask the questions. How are we procuring these cards at this amount? So, multi-million-dollar project, set up all these parastatals across the country. You can't fight that, right? Why are you fighting something like a national ID card? Some of these apps that are being launched, the Vice President is a beautiful gentleman. But when I talk to him, I see someone who is interested in making sure that the right things are done. He's probably not concerned about the other side of those who are actually benefiting and laughing all the way to the bank. Now, that kind of corruption is the type we are just going to be dealing with right now. As of the other ones, those petty ones, and it's true, I mean, my good friend's lifelong work has been about fighting corruption, really, and she already mentioned some of the areas, bribery and all of that. We should be dealing with that. But at this stage, some of the, corruption has debilitated, high-level corruption is what we actually be dealing with. I recall somewhere in 2016, was it not 2006, I was in London and having a conversation about these issues that corruption on the continent corruption cost the continent almost 25% of its GDP, right? At the time, that was $149 billion of the continent's GDP. There was this guy from Christian Aid who was fighting me that why am I against government getting more aid? And I said, listen, and then he gave a statistic. He said, well, did I know that hunger or nutrition kills a child in Africa every 3 seconds? Well, I've done the calculation of grand corruption cost per second. It was $4,900 per second. Now, if you got that, juxtapose that over 3, it may sound funny, it may sound propagandist, but that's the way we have to analyze development. So if you're doing high-level corruption, just ask yourself how much $176 million could have been used from Kelny to pay for school fees for kids, buy food for some of these kids, and all of those. Those matters, just let them sink. We are not against private actors making money, but just do it right.
Okay.
And on that, on corruption, I think I just want to say something else about you asked me a question about a manifesto. We see manifesto as some sort of a legitimacy, some sort of barometer of legitimacy for political party promises. Promises are interesting and are great. I mean, I counted quite a number of promises. I've forgotten the numbers, but I'm sure it will come. And look, I seriously think we need a proper conversation about how to organize the state. There are so many promises. You tend to look at them and you ask yourself, what do we need as a state? What is the optimal size of money the state needs to prosecute the basics of life? Water, electricity, roads, healthcare. Those are the most important things, really. I mean, all other things that we keep jumping about every now and then, depending on the crowd the politicians see, say, oh, memo car, memo bicycle. It's like, it's become some sort of an ecstasy, really. And just to say that I've looked at the manifestos through and through. A bit of that which tries to address the issues that matter to people, that make it a bit more human or human-related, seem to be the ones that are related to the health sector, the water, as I said, maybe education.
But we'd like to focus on the governance commitment. So, really dealing with corruption.
I thought you gave me a blanket check. So,
no.
Well, listen, on the governance issues, let me just deal with a few of those governance issues. I yield to the fact that the politicians have now woken up to the idea that we do need a downsized government. And I'm a firm believer in limited government. I'm a libertarian, through and through. So I like, when I see that, I like it. So the MPP says 50 ministers cap. NDC says 60 ministers cap. Movement for Change says 40 ministers cap. Movement for Change has interesting ideas. My good friend Ayariga is here. I've read your manifesto, by the way. I'll speak to that some time back. And I see all these. By the way, some of the things these parties want to do originated from Ayariga. People do not know. His manifesto actually comes much earlier than the rest, but we don't give him that credit. But just stay on this point about the capping.
And that's the club by the presidential candidates of the All People's Congress. Okay.
So the capping of this ministerial thing is important. Look, if the NDC and NPP get to do it really, and there's an amendment of the articles, is it 7-1 properly? I'm sure we'll be able to save close to 2.5 billion Ghana cedis, because 1.3 billion for ministerial. Oh, sorry. I'm very sorry. So if we manage to cap the ministers at 50 and maybe 60, let me go with the MPP formula because that seems to be a bit more in the middle. So 50, you tend to look at, we did the calculation and it comes to savings of about 1.3 billion Ghana cedis for the duration of the 4 years, hypothetically 4 years. But then if you added that of Article 71 holders that are supposed to be yanked off, something I totally wish we should do immediately. Honorable Gade is here, I don't know what he thinks. We should be making close to 2.5 billion Ghana cedis, right? We can spend about, at the time we did some sort of a referendum, I mean, when we were doing this constitutional review stuff, we spent about 6 million Ghana cedis to go around the country asking for ideas. If we extrapolate that and did some sort of value for, did rationalize for inflation, you'll be needing close to about 32 million Ghana cedis for a referendum of that nature. And trust me, if you add Ghanaians, should Article 71 holders be expunged from the Molimedo, say yes.
Okay.
Franklin,
we'll get to delve deeper into what you found amongst others. Let me bring in Dr. Nana on this one as well. She's a citizen, not a spectator, and a CSO activist as well. And you've also been looking at it. At least we've identified the gaps. We've talked about a few of them. But really, from your viewpoint, where you sit, where you stand, what exactly
exists, but to include the candidates, because a lot of the time this financing does not necessarily go to the political parties, it goes to the candidates. So for the candidates to file this, to have this audited accounts, the section 29 of the Political Parties Act has the option to publish the declaration of assets by political parties, but this is an option that the EC has. It's never been done, and we don't see any of the political parties committing to see that this is done in their manifestos. None of the political parties has committed to passing the Conduct of Public Officers bill into law. That's one area that we believe that has to be looked at as well. Also, I think Mary mentioned it, institutionalizing and enforcing the client service charter for public institutions, looking at what are the services that public institutions provide, what is the procedure of providing that service, what's the cost, what's the turnaround time, so that people will know these things and they don't have to put something on the paper or under the paper to get the public services that they need. Are we going to see in the manifestos? I mean, it's already done, but is that something that they could look at? Article 2864, if you look at our constitution, looks at the issues around illicit enrichment. Are we going to see this criminalized? A colleague of mine, late colleague of mine, used to say that these days you don't talk about your children about becoming lawyers or doctors or engineers. It's either politician or pastor, because that is where the money is. Now, I mean, it's something that we need to look at. People are getting rich from going into politics, and that is one of the things that we need to be looking at. Conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Is this an area? I know that I've seen something in the NDC manifesto on that, on conflict of interest, but really, I believe that that is one of the areas that we have to take seriously when it comes to nepotism in public office. And how are we going to deal with that? How are the political parties promising to deal with that? So I'm saying that, yes, I think integrity is key. And to a large extent, Ghana has several laws, policies, regulations on, that deal with corruption and institutions. How are we rather going to enforce these laws? How are we going to resource the institutions, the Office of the Special Prosecutor? How are we going to ensure that it is resourced properly so that it can do the work that it has to do? Okay. And overall, I would hope that we would go also just beyond the political parties. This really goes, it is something that we have to look at the very fabric of our society, and all of us need to address.
We have 7 political parties with us today, and so we would want to wrap up briefly, and then we can bring them in to hear all that you've talked about and what exactly they are going to do differently, since they want to be make up the next government. But Nana ended on the bit about the laws, and David started off with that and mentioned about the laws and its impact. You also talked about the impact of corruption on inflation. So really, what are the critical areas, David, briefly, that you want them to tackle when it comes to the fight against corruption? We've seen the gaps, so what should they do?
I think the biggest gap of all is actually where Nana ended. It is the failure to enforce what is existing. Last year, I had the privilege to be the speaker at the Constitutional Day lecture. And I made a statement I've repeated over and over, and I'm going to repeat that statement here. There is no law on earth which is so good as to prevent somebody who is evil-minded from doing evil. No law. And there is no law which is so bad as to prevent somebody who wants to do good from doing good. Now, I get worried when we advocate for more laws. And please permit me a few minutes. We've had laws on corruption forever, from the criminal code. Then we came to putting it something in the constitution. Then under Shraj, we gave Shraj the power. Then we came to create SFO. And we changed the SFO to Yoko. And then we come to special prosecutor. And each one of them has had all these challenges. Then come to talk about World Bank support to pass Public Procurement Act. I had the privilege of doing the policy framework for the Public Procurement Act. I had the privilege of even working on the review. How many people have been sanctioned for corruption from public procurement, which is the major place where the corruption takes place? We passed an Audit Service Act, which was one of the conditions for HIPIC. How many people have been sanctioned as a result of the Audit Service Act, the law that out? We passed a Whistleblower Act. How many people have blown the whistle? Don't we have cases where police have even blown the whistle on whistleblowers? We asked for Freedom of Information Act, and we said, once we have that, we had that, we whistled the Freedom of Information Act down. How many people have exercised that freedom and been able to make the disclosure and all the rest? Now we are asking for asset declaration. When even lifestyle audit, asked by the audit service itself, has not been implemented. So I'm not so much a fan of laws. And the problem with these laws is that we create more institutions, create a burden on the public purse, end up with DDEP and things like that. The institutions which are existing, to what extent are we allowing them to work? And I think that the anti-corruption institutions, GII, the coalition, etc., should focus more on that, because it's really the problem. Otherwise, it's just talk and more institutions, and I don't fancy these institutions. At the end of the day, if somebody in power decides it won't work, it won't work. I think the other recommendation worth focusing on is that these institutions should push for transparency, starting from public procurement. What is wrong, for example, with publishing who won an award above a certain percentage? I don't see anything wrong with it. This is the contractor who won the award. This is the price. This is how long it has to take to finish. These are the releases. There is nothing wrong with that. If we publish that, we will know that how much are we overpaying those who are supposed to execute projects. If we push for transparency, we don't need more laws. These things will find a way of working for themselves. And I think citizens should, for want of a better word, ignore the restrictions that is placed by the very laws, because the laws have become an excuse for non-performance. That's what it is. Somebody doesn't perform, doesn't fight corruption, and we say, okay, it is because we didn't have an anti-corruption law. It is because we didn't have this and all that. Don't we all know what corruption is? We all know. It's as simple as that. I mean, I think we should stop getting fixated about laws and laws and laws.
Okay. Mary, the critical things they need to attack.
Hello?
Yes. It's on.
Okay, great. So, for me, I think we have had this discussion before, and I agree totally that, number one, we need to enforce, and we have spoken to that. Enforcement is the only deterrent that we would be able to use to deter others. So if I'm at a place and everybody is doing it and getting away with it, certainly as human, I would also want to do same. But then if you look at the manifestos again, unless of course they have better particulars to show us, you would realize that in the enforcement category, very few of them are talking about that. And you realize they are talking about things that could bring up other discussions as to whether they really want to fight corruption or they want to go after people who have been in power and perhaps may have left. So for us, enforcement is very important. Again, we need to be very clear as to what exactly we mean when we say corruption. That is very important. For us in Ghana, we do not live on an island. The UNCAC says we should criminalize certain behaviors. And some of those behaviors, including unexplained wealth, is one of the critical areas we haven't done well in. And so when somebody has huge sums of money in their wardrobe and we find it, we cannot support that by any law. It goes to court and the court will throw it out. So we need to be able to go back to our definition of what we mean by corruption. He says we know what corruption is, but our constitution is restricted. The Criminal Offences Act, sections 239 and 240, they are restricted. And so people go and it's thrown out because it doesn't constitute corrupt behavior. We know, yes, the Yoko Act has tried to put up some remedy for the lifestyle audit when it comes to AML, but it is not for corruption. So sometimes we just need to go back to our laws, what we have. We don't need new laws. We need what we have. Let's revise them to make them appropriate and to capture all the behaviors that we want to see as corruption. So how can we see that somebody has all this money, you have just started work within 3 years, you've built story buildings, 7-floor story buildings, you already have luxury cars. I'm not talking about any particular person, but and yet we cannot hold such persons accountable. We need to begin to do that. And when we do that and the laws are biting, certainly we would see some very good actions by the citizens. Yes, and like we said, we shouldn't take ourselves out of the equation. We are also part of it. So we want to see more proactiveness on our part, reporting more and also demanding for accountability. Because when we report and we sit aloof and watch, and then when we encourage people by calling them all sorts of names, then we are also encouraging corruption to thrive. And when we do not support the institutions who are working on anti-corruption, we are also saying that we are not bothered. After all, it can happen. It is not my money. But remember that the hospitals we need are not being built. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Kujo, for you, what would be the critical areas that the next government should tackle?
Okay, so since I was on the matter of governance, let me just point out two things that I've seen through the manifestos. The delinking, the decoupling of the district creation from the constituency creation as well. I think that thing for me speaks volumes, and I think it's one of the areas where we waste money unnecessarily, dice up the country into regions and fiefdoms and the 6 regions that were created. What additional value really have we added to the economy? Really? We need to take that particular promise seriously. And I think the parties that have suggested that, I think it was the NDC or so, that suggested that we should make sure we get to it. Districts must be created based on serious economic potential. I mean, if we are putting districts, factories all over the place like confetti, you ask yourself, are these districts productive today? Because most districts in this country are valued about roughly $1.5 billion at the time these things were being thought of. But do you need to put factories everywhere? There's something called agglomeration and economics, and I think we need to start looking at those. Closely related to this promise, this whole thing has to do with this this thinking that assembly members have to be paid money to do work. You know, the district office in the Kimoda in Eastern Region in 2022 decided to give electoral areas money to do developmental projects. It was a paltry 8,400 Ghana cedis to do bridges, boreholes. How much is a borehole? It's about 20-something thousand or 10,000 something in that region. So I think we should be careful about how we build our local governance system, because it's very important. The last point I want to make about corruption, I'll be very brief. Look, Ben, we did this work together. We analyzed over 1,000 procurement contracts that we've seen so far. Only 5% could pass muster per the laws that we have put together. If in the very year we're going to the IMF, or the year we got to go to the IMF, there's a time when 85% of all procurement issues did not go through the Give Me system, a system we ourselves have created. What do you think we are doing to ourselves? And here is where I'll call on Clara. Clara, my good friend, and all the donors. You are one of the most important people in this part of our world. And I think you encourage and facilitate corruption. Why? Because you invest money into these procurement systems. Sorry, what's it called? Public financial management. Ben, we are tired. They put the money, you talk to World Bank, oh, we'll do this, we'll do this. You go and see, they give them 150 million, 250 million. Then you go and look at the report, you see, there's nothing really happening. The only real people fighting corruption, grand corruption, are civil society actors and investigative journalists. That's why you should give us the more money, really. We are not saints, but obviously, we are not saints, but we can definitely get to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, Nana, in wrapping up on that, please. Okay.
Thank you very much. I definitely agree that we need to enforce the laws that we have. I think the lack of enforcement has created the impunity that we are seeing. I blame the Galamsey menace that we currently have. A lot of the problem is because of corruption. A lot of the problems that we are facing is because of corruption. And it's definitely one area that we need to address. I also think that beyond, like I said, beyond political party manifestos, we have to look at how we actually build a culture of integrity throughout the country at all the different levels in this country. We have a value system currently that actually appreciates money more than how you got the money. So when you are wealthy, you have the best seat in church, you are the one who gets access to all the different, the best things, and nobody questions where the money came from.
Because your tithe is big.
There's society. And I would want to speak, because this is a public event, to also our traditional leaders and our religious leaders who wield immense influence on our people, that we need to be looking at the issue of addressing corruption at every level in our society. Today, when you have artisans come and do some work in your house, everybody wants to take something from you. And that goes beyond political party manifestos. I think that we really have to look at ourselves individually as Ghanaians and what is best for this country, but also look at how we build that culture. And it means that we need to do a lot more. And all the different institutions at social level, political level, we all need to be part of this. Thank you.
Well, I see Mary lobbying me so that we come in briefly.
Sorry, just a quick one.
I need to bring in the political parties.
This country that recently enacted a law, was it Sweden, where if you are driving a very posh car, they stop you and ask you, how did you get this car? Okay. And I think we should give our police people the opportunity.
Okay, Mary. Let Mary wrap it up for us, and let's bring in the political parties.
So for the partners, I speak on behalf of the partners for this project and say that the park is the opportunity for all citizens to stand up and be counted for anti-corruption. So you should sign up to be a partner who is saying no to corruption and corrupt behavior today. So the pledge against corruption, if you have your card, the agenda is behind for presidents, and then there's also another one for citizens. And because we want to be active citizens and we want to be heard, please let us sign up and be counted. And we are not just signing up and going away, we are signing up and saying that these critical areas we have identified as partners on the pack, we would all work towards achieving them. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Just one small point. Okay. It's on the issue of traditional leaders. I talk about it a lot. If during the campaign, just watch the political parties. They go to greet the chiefs. And even though it's not public, every greeting comes with some drink. We know that. And they spend these monies there. Now, when the political parties come into power, they go and thank the chiefs as well. And it is these chiefs, when people are corrupt, and even if you want to deal with them, they will give you a call and all that. We need to talk to them.
I'm sure you're hearing them say it's tradition.
No, but tradition should not be. You know, there is a case where a chief in Derurampo was actually jailed for taking drink beyond a certain amount of money, a certain amount which went beyond drink. Drink traditionally is supposed to be a token. Okay. Now it is actually a whole sack.
Well, on that note, I'd like to thank my expert panel for this part. As we bring in the political parties, I must say we are live on the Joy News channel. We are live on the Channel 1 TV as well. We are live on all our social media platforms, Pledge Against Corruption. And I'd like to thank Mrs. Mariada, Franklin Kujo, Nana Santua Afajinu, and of course, David Ofosudote. And I've seen a number of institutions here that I would like to go briefly to them as I bring in the political parties to take their seats up here. And of course, I can't see Mr. Dako and not go to him. They've talked about resourcing some institutions in this country. So please come to me, Mr. Dako. And the political parties are here. They are going to form the next government. They will be your next bosses. Really, what are your expectations from them? Briefly. You are the only one now allowed to speak because of the Office of the Special Prosecutor.
All right, thank you. Good morning to all of us. There are a few inputs I'd like to make, and I'll start from where Franklin got off and said that. Did you say Sweden? Did you say Sweden? I don't know, but he says that if you are driving and you can be stopped and that law in Ghana. Yes. The Office of the Special Prosecutor has been given the power to do that, and is doing that. And that brings back the conversation on unexplained wealth. Unexplained wealth is already criminal in Ghana. I think we are talking about the practicalizing of it. You know, when the Constitution provides for something larger, the Constitution provides in Article 284 something that if your lawful income does not match your assets, you must be made to explain. So all I'm trying to say is that it's erroneous when we say Ghana does not have unexplained wealth law. Ghana has unexplained wealth law. But the challenge here, and I'll come to it, is the reverse burden they talked about. So currently, if you take the Office of the Special Prosecutor, when we see Franklin Kujo driving, say, the latest Mercedes-Benz, yes, we have the power to stop you and seize your car that very moment, and we can keep the vehicle for up to 7 days without going to court to enable us to investigate you. Now, the problem is that sometimes when you have investigated someone, when he was committing the corruption, you and I, as Dr. Baumia said sometime, we were not there. So sometimes it's very difficult trying to link whatever he has acquired to the corruption. So when we say the reverse burden for the law enforcement agents, all we are trying to say is that we should be able to demonstrate that if you put Franklin Kujo's lawful income together, he couldn't have afforded that particular vehicle he's buying. Then the reverse shift to Franklin Kujo to now tell us how he got it. So in the course of us investigating, you will say that your deceased brother bought the car for you. We are going to check your deceased brother whether he had the money to buy the car for you. So by the time we tell the court that we have checked all your lawful income and we are convinced that you could not have afforded it, that is when we need the reverse burden of proof. So that was the part that I want to make a little input about when it comes to reverse burden of proof. And then we've talked about one last thing, which is also dear to my heart, the Conduct of Public Officers Bill. Sometimes I say that Ghana is a country that we have so many laws, but we don't have efficient laws. For me, from the Office of the Special Prosecutor and as a lawyer, I'm happy we have not passed the Conduct of Public Officers Bill, although I'm in the anti-corruption business, because as it stands now, if we pass it, it will become another white elephant. Let me tell you two critical things. We are in this country, we are worried and say that the Attorney General is sometimes conflicted and unable to prosecute his own. That's why we came up with the Office of the Special Prosecutor. But all the offenses under the Conduct of Public Officers Bill will go to the Attorney General. Remember, when it started, there was no OSP at play. So it ought to be amended so that many of the offenses that fall under corruption would then fall under the OSP. Other than that, if we are worried that the attorney, you give me a little second. If we are worried about that, it will not work. Also, the law as it stands now is piecemeal. Even when you talk about gifts, there is no ceiling. But we know in the UK and other places, an MP cannot take, say, a gift beyond £300. In Ghana's Conduct of Public Officers Bill, there is no ceiling. So the law says that don't take a gift that is likely to influence your decision. I can say that if you even give me a Lamborghini, it will not influence my decision, and they will go. Then the last one I also want to talk about is the term corruption. One of the problems why I think, please don't crucify me on this, the perception of corruption is also extremely high in Ghana is that we call every offense corruption. And I heard our sister talking about Galamsey and saying, also linking it to corruption. Please, it's time in Ghana we call offense what they are. Galamsey is Galamsey, is an offense. If you engage in Galamsey, it's an offense on its own. If you engage in stealing, stealing is an offense on its own. If you engage in money laundering, it is money laundering. If you engage in tax evasion, it's tax evasion. Until Ghana's law decides to now define corruption to include tax evasion, money laundering, then we cannot say that tax evasion and money laundering is corruption properly so-called. So my last one, that is why when the OSP was investigating some issue, and then we ended up saying that, oh, we can't investigate this matter because it falls under tax evasion and money laundering, and we have to send it to a sister organization. People were up in arms and did not understand. Why can the OSP not investigate that? Because the power given to the OSP limits the OSP to only corruption and corruption related, which does not include money laundering, which does not include tax evasion. So it cannot go into those aspects. With those few words, thank you.
I was going to ask you how many deceased brothers you have investigated, but that will bring another issue. So we'll now, at this point, introduce upstage our political party representatives here. And of course, I would start with the only presidential candidate in our midst. Please, let's welcome the presidential candidate for the All People's Congress, Mr. Hassan Ayariga. Please give him a round of applause. And of course, we have the only running mate also in our midst, and that's Dr. Miriam Isaka Krisis, who's a vice presidential candidate for the New Force. Please give her a round of applause as she comes up as well. I also like to bring up lawyer Kwame Jantua, is the chairman of the political affairs for the Convention People's Party, the CPP. I'll also bring up Mr. Joe Gate, is representing the New Patriotic Party. Please give him a round of applause as he comes up. Raymond Livingston Kusogbo is the Deputy National Communications Director for the Ghana Union Movement. Also with us, please give him a round of applause as he comes up. Goom. I also have Courage Nobi, is the Director of Communications for Movement for Change. Please give him a round of applause as he comes up. I think we've gone through all. Okay. We have the NDC. Do we have the Deputy General Secretary of the NDC joining us? Okay, Mustafa Bande was supposed to be with us. It does appear we did not have him joining us. So I think we are good to go at this point. Once he joins us, we will go through it. So we have the new force, we have the APC, we have the CPP, we have GUM, we have MFC, and of course the NPP. So we'll start off with the only presidential candidate, of course. He will speak on authority for his party. And we are told that he is the only one that has a manifesto that really tackles issues about corruption. But there's been concerns raised also about the term itself. So for the APC, definition really broadly for corruption and how you're really tackling it, would want to start with you.
Hello, yes, good afternoon. All protocol observed. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Hassan Ayerga, founder, leader, and flag bearer of the All People's Congress. I'm very grateful to be among you today to discuss the issues of corruption and how we intend to handle corruption. As you can see, like she said, I'm the only presidential candidate willing to face this and also to explain to you where we are as a country, what we can do, and the measures we have put in place to change this. First of all, in 2016, when political parties were bringing out manifesto, I proposed special prosecutor's office. And I said, we needed to have a special prosecutor office in order to begin to fight corruption differently. And my proposal was not a special prosecutor's office, but an independent special prosecutor office. Totally different from what we have today.
It's not independent?
It is not independent. The one we have works with the office with the Attorney General. And we want an office that stands on its own, autonomous, has its own budget, determine its own cases without necessarily working hand in hand with the office of the Attorney General. They must be autonomous. They must have the power to prosecute, investigate, and have the authority to do things on their own. Once they work under the office of the Attorney General, then they lose the essence of that office. So MPP implementing it should have at least made some consultations with Hassan Ayerga or the APC, because this is how we want to build our country, an inclusive governance concept, where we all have views being considered in order to build this country. This country is for all of us. It doesn't matter which party is in power, who is president, who is not. Imani Ghana comes with a lot of proposals on so many things, other institutions, CEOs come. This is to build this country together. We cannot sit and watch a particular country, a government, implement policies that we do have better. But in all this, in my 2024 manifesto, in fighting corruption, let's first look at one thing first, the mindset. The mindset is the most important tool that will help fight corruption in this country. Our attitude. What kind of attitude do we have? You can put all the laws of corruption in this country. Why we do not have a change of mindset and attitude, we will lose it all. Laws are meant to be followed through attitudinal change and change of mindset. And we Ghanaians do not have that kind of mindset to be able to do things the right way and build this country devoid of corruption, mismanagement, wastage. And if we cannot have that kind of mindset, I always say, even if Jesus Christ come back, the churches will still be corrupt. He won't be able to manage them. I say, if Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam come back, the mosque will be corrupt. And that Nkrumah coming back cannot even win an election in Ghana, because we have a different kind of mindset now than before. And that is a fact. And we must begin to understand that. What kind of mindset do we have as citizens of Ghana? Where do we want to get to? What do we want to achieve? What is the level of patriotism? What is the level of honesty, sincerity, transparency, and leadership? What kind of leadership do we want to have in our next generation? What are we impacting to the younger generation coming up? What are they going to learn from us as parents, as leaders of this country?
Okay.
And that is the number one aspect of my policy, change of mindset. Then number two, you cannot fight corruption without data. You cannot fight corruption without a national data system. We do not have a data system of everything that we have in this country. People have properties without data. People have homes without data. And I intend to roll a national data system that will capture every information of every Ghanaian. Don't confuse my data with Ghana card. I will explain.
Okay.
So the national data system is designed to capture your properties, your data, your salaries, including every work you do in this country. So we'll take data right from your biometrics, the properties you own in this country. So every property in that country must have an owner.
Okay.
Every car in this country must have an owner. Every land must have an owner. Every resources that your bank account details will be captured. Where you work, your salary, whether you pay taxes or not, every single information of you is under the fingertip of the national database.
Okay.
And once we have this national database, nobody can be corrupt in this country.
Okay.
Because it becomes a data-driven economy and policies that is targeted at looking into your affairs. So even the police will have information of you. A phone number.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Sanayarga, on this. But of course, you need to set the record straight when it comes to the office of the special prosecutor, really. We all know that it's very independent and it's not under the Attorney General, like you said. So maybe the MPP is also implementing exactly what you were hoping to implement. But let me bring in Dr. Mariam on this, the vice presidential candidate of the new force as well. So you are the latest kid on the block, just like the movement for change. What will be different when it comes to your fight against corruption and what exactly is in your manifesto? We've heard about the gaps.
Yeah.
What exactly will be different with the new force?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss this very important topic. I think that I would like to commend the GACC for this initiative. The fight for the fight against corruption is not an easy one, but it is worth the effort. There are three things that we envisage to do at the new force to address the issue of corruption in this country. One is to work with the CSOs and anti-corruption agencies to strengthen the anti-corruption legal framework and the institutions in the country. We also look at making sure that government data is secure and that government operations are also transparent. That is the second one. And then the third one, we think that corruption cannot be fought only at the government level. So we also are looking at working with the local communities, so establishing the anti-corruption networks so that we train them, empower them to understand the corruption issues in the country so they can interrogate governance issues at the local level. So we do acknowledge and we understand a lot of the issues relating to the existing regulations. The expert panel mentioned a few. We talked about the issues concerning the asset declaration. We have a law in place, and yet the Auditor General, to whom the public officers have to report, doesn't have the mandate to verify the declaration. And then we've also talked about the fact that the penalty for non-compliance is rather weak, and so it doesn't encourage the public officials to comply. And so we think that this is something that is very important, very key, and we are looking forward to enhancing this regulation, of course, working with the anti-corruption agencies. Then in terms of data, I mentioned the fact that it's very important for us to secure government data. You can imagine a scenario where we don't have any idea of the barrels of oil that we produce or the amount of cocoa that we produce. And then, of course, that means we cannot tell how much export revenue we generate from these resources. So it's very important for us to have a system in place that secures government data, as well as the processes. We've been talking about the Procurement Act and the fact that there is this focus on sole sourcing rather than competitive bidding, you know. And that means that we are not going to get value for money if we do that. So, as I mentioned, these are some of the things that we are looking forward to doing, working with the CSOs to strengthen the existing regulatory framework and institutions that are concerned with anti-corruption.
Okay. Well, let me come to you, Mr. Kwame Jantwa. And of course, I know that there are a number of questions in the audience for you as well, but we'll get to it shortly. It will be very participatory at this point. But CPP, you've been around for quite some time. We've talked about the gaps in the system, at least when it comes to manifestos. You've heard the experts on this issue. What is the CPP offering that is different?
Good morning. Let me start from where Franklin left off. Franklin, how can you have a situation in this country where every car has one home on it, and they can hire a police rider to drive them everywhere to stop them and ask them where they got their car from? Not possible. It isn't something that would happen. But let me start by also saying that you need a leader who is sacrificial, with the intention to do good by the country and not by their political party. It is key. Look, is this the first time we are coming here to talk about this? Every 4 years, we come and we talk about the same thing. We throw things in our manifestos to what? To fox the people. Because as the panel rightly said, what has happened? Our democracy is what, 30 years. Have we really tackled corruption? If you take our manifestos, have we been able to do it? And the panel said it. There are certain issues that really haven't been tackled. I think with us in the CPP, we see corruption as multifaceted and needs a multifaceted approach. We are not interested in throwing things to do what? To fox the people. Come in and not to do what we have to do. So when I talk about, or when we talk about multifaceted, what should the approach be? Within the CPP, the first 90 days of a CPP government, we are going to hold a corruption summit. That corruption summit will not only have politicians, will have all stakeholders. And if you listen to the panel, my dear lady who's sitting at the corner, she indicated that the people don't tend to be part and parcel of it. We would bring the people on board for us to discuss. And what we are going to discuss, we are going to discuss the causes of corruption. What are the causes? What are those things? Because you need to be able to look at the causes before you can bring in the laws that can hold those causes. So, I have listed a few. One of the major causes of corruption is low public sector wages and salaries and petty corruption. My salary, and so I can't use it to do anything. Somebody comes, businessman comes, he offers something. Will I not take it? That has to be addressed. The culture of political patronage. Do we not see it today? Isn't it something that is causing challenges for us? Political patronage? We will have to discuss it and go deep into it. The weak legal framework within our anti-corruption institutions and the question of their ineffectiveness. Aren't they all sitting in the room here? Do we not hear of them? Are they strong enough to handle corruption? They are not. Why aren't they? We will need to discuss it. The lack of transparency in government procurement processes. You heard the panel talk about procurement. Is it not a challenge? Is procurement not a challenge? Do people not fight to be ministers and whatever, get posts because of procurement? True or false? Procurement is a challenge that needs to be discussed, but it doesn't take one political party to discuss it. It takes a collective. Hence, we want to have such a meeting. Okay. Cultural norms and attitudes. Was it my brother who I shared the same birthday with, who indicated that when you go to a chief's place, what do you take? You take drinks, you take this, you take this. To do what? To tell the chief what? Because you say it's traditional. But you're trying to buy the chief to do what you want him to do. No, be so. It needs to be looked at. It is something we'll discuss. The almighty political financing. We are talking Galamsey today, aren't we? Have we even been able to ask politicians, how are you financing your campaign? Have we been able to? And
how
they
are
tell
you financing?
Us,
They're asking you directly.
Sorry?
How are you financing? How is the CPP financing the campaign?
Well, is that a second question or what?
You just asked us to ask you. You just threw the question to us, so we are throwing it back to you.
You see, one of the major challenges we have in this country with political parties is that we cannot institute the due system in our political parties. It is something that we feel scared of bringing it in because the people themselves. So politicians have to find ways of doing it. I am not absolving my party, please. Don't say I'm absolving my party. It is happening in all political parties. And those political parties that aren't in power, they get it from those who are in power. And because they get it from those who are in power, there are certain things they can't do. It needs to be changed. We need to discuss it.
Okay. Mr. Jantwa, I'll come back to you on it. We'll have another round on this. But thankfully, Mr. Jogate, it looks like all eyes are on you right now, obviously, because you're in government and you're hoping to come back to the next government as well. Really, there are concerns that we have not been taken seriously as a people, and then also the fight against corruption has not been tackled as it ought to be, at least. We had that in the manifesto. What exactly would you say has been done? Have you taken the people seriously and the fight?
Well, thank you very much. I think that just sitting down and listening to the CEOs and the comments before me took me back to some of my personal experiences. 2006-7, I became the Attorney General. One of the things that happens to you when you become Attorney General, that people immediately come to you and tell you how corrupt somebody is. Mr. A is a corrupt man. You have to arrest him. That's what. Even before the Whistleblowers Act came into force. And I remember they came to me and said one former minister has signed a contract in December of the year they lost the election. So like, we are in November, you lose an election, and in December you sign a contract. And you shouldn't have signed the contract in December. And it shows that there was corruption. When you look at the contract, there's nothing corrupt about the contract. But this person is telling me that there's corruption. Now the first thing is that because there was no Public Procurement Act, the minister could sign the contract. Can you imagine now the level of contracts that are being signed? If an individual has the power to decide that I'm giving this contract worth $200 million to my friend or something, even if he seeks to give it to his friend under a sole sourcing regime, that can be questioned. And so, what will we do without law? What will we really do without law? Even if the laws are not adequate, even if we need enforcement, the fact that the law is there, for me as a lawyer, and as somebody who has been an implementer of the law and has also been an infrastructure minister, I think it is much better that the law is there. I'll give you another example about public procurement. When I was railway minister, we decided to do the Accra-Kumasi line through PPP. Pricewaterhouse had done a study on the line and said there was a gap, a financial viability gap, cost over $2 billion, and a financial viability gap of about 200 million, which meant that if you were doing it by PPP, it was only cost effective. It only made economic sense if it was $1.8 billion, but the cost of $2 billion didn't make sense. We started a procurement process. When we reached the last stage, I saw that they were asking, all of them were asking us questions which meant a commitment of the ministry, a financial commitment. For example, they wanted guarantees that they could charge a certain amount. And if they couldn't charge that amount, government would pay for them. As the Minister for Railway Development, I didn't have the power to commit government. The Public Financial Management Act is clear. There's the Ministry of Finance who has that power. I went to have a discussion with the Ministry of Finance and said, the commitments that even though they say it's PPP, they will build, operate, and transfer, they are asking for certain financial commitments that I'm not in a position to make. So I want somebody from your ministry to sit on the panel for the final process of procurement. Somebody from the ministry sat on the panel, somebody won the bid. The second person protested on two grounds, that there was something that he didn't agree with the feature going on, and also I changed the panel at the last stage. Public Procurement Authority agreed with him and said we should go through the final stage again. Listen, it wasn't personal for me. I didn't know any of the bidders, and I was happy that at least we had a body in place and we had a system where somebody could protest and get what he wants. The final stage did not take place and I left the position. But the point I'm making is that I wonder what we do without law. I come to the second point that somebody has made, and the person made a story about entering a bus and nobody. Listen, when I went to London for the first time in the 80s, there were no cameras. And so people passing through the gates, it was happening every day. One of my colleagues is in the room. He was talking on his phone in Accra. And when he went about 100 meters, he was stopped by the police. And they said, you were talking on phone. No, I'm not talking on my phone. I'm not talking. They played him the video of you talking on his phone. So just now, when you call him and he's in the car, he won't pick his phone. We underestimate the impact of what is happening now. Digitization, and so we underestimate the impact. Because even the fact that there are cameras everywhere makes people more careful now. I watched on social media, there was some theft at Adabaka. They caught the people. And so what is happening, what the NPP has done over the years is to just implement not only the law, the policy, and also the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure, which will allow or make it more difficult for you to be corrupt.
Okay, but I'm sure you can hear the murmuring in the background. The concern really is that why are the laws inefficient? It's because you are not resourcing the institutions that are supposed to make the law efficient. What have you done and what will you do differently?
You see, this question you've asked me, I punched the question. You know the way you punch questions, so you prepare for them. And the question has landed, so I have the figures. When I go to sit down, you have to punch. I point your question. Okay. The budgetary allocation to the police has increased by 162%. The budgetary allocation to the audit service has increased by 83%. The budgetary allocation by charge has increased by 21%. You can allocate what you have, but I am telling you that we have been committed to increase the budgetary allocation to these institutions. But don't also forget, the same people who say that there's corruption, when you increase the budgetary allocation, you must leave the person to do his work. Because the executive should not be to become sort of what shall I call it? Operators of the law. Okay. I totally believe in leaving the institutions to do their work. You put the law there, one, you make sure they have the budgetary allocation, and nobody has enough budgetary allocation in this country. Nobody. But you try and give them as much as you can, and then you allow them to work. But unfortunately, since you organized the memory, I know you organized it. Unfortunately, people, everything, not just the definition of corruption is broad, everything is the executive. So if there's some policeman or somebody who has just something, so the people are corrupt, then they are the executive. And I tell you that for me, as a lawyer, the Whistleblowers Act, the Anti-Corruption, the Anti-Money Laundering Act, where you have to prove the source of your income. The Public Procurement Act, where a government official cannot sit down only when you are buying paper and so on. Listen, as an attorney general, we're going to buy cars. We are going through the process. Madam, just this point. We are going through the process of procurement. We're going to buy Toyotas for the lawyers. Everything looked kosher. I mean, the minister was not, I wasn't a member of the public procurement, whatever they call it, but everything that was brought to me looked good. I went across the street one day to visit Suti, who was the Auditor General, who was my friend. Suti also told me, I'm buying cars for my people. I said, what car? I said, Toyota. How much does it cost? He said, $19,000. Mine was $20-something thousand. I stopped it. Because you can buy a Toyota from one country, let's say Japan. It doesn't mean there's anything corrupt with it. And so what I'm saying is that we will continue to implement and to expand the legal regime and to expand the technological infrastructure, which will make corruption more difficult and less attractive.
Okay. Mr. Kusogo, at least the Ghana Union movement, we know, emerged as a third force in the last election. But let's talk about your corruption and, of course, the measures that you're putting in place when it comes to the fight against corruption, you'd say.
Yeah, thank you very much. We need to appreciate that issues about corruption are evolving, and therefore we need to do what you call regulatory institutional mapping of corruption legislations in order to corroborate more evidence, address the gaps we have in the current regulatory frameworks. If you do that and also extrapolate some best management principles elsewhere, we will be in a position to begin to take a holistic approach in getting reforms, institutional reforms, legal reforms, in order to address them and implement them. One, we have realized, GUMO have realized that the current regulatory institutional frameworks we have lacks a lot of internalization, ability to implement and bear results. We have several reforms, we have several political and institutional and corruption regulatory documentations, conventions Ghana signed. Regionally in Africa, Ghana appends signature to that. In the country Ghana, we have excellent frameworks. But the question is, why do we have challenges in the implementation? Undisputedly, one is as a result of weak institutional implementation dispositions. Institutions are weak. They can't implement all the regulatory frameworks that we have. Aside that, there are a lot of political interference in the implementation of these institutional and legal reforms that we have in the country Ghana. Undisputedly, we are saying that, GUM is saying that, we need to empower CSOs. CSOs operate in a form of freedom that we can empower them to hold the government accountable. Another one, extrapolating lessons from institutional theory. The weaker the institutions are, the less funding they have. The institutions that are easily manipulated by the political authorities in power don't have the capacity to implement the regulatory requirements they are supposed to internalize. Consequently, we need to ensure that their autonomy is intact. And we need also to know that, looking at the current economic dispensation, when there is poverty, when there is economic hardship, the tendency of public institutions, public sector workers to engage in corruption is very high, undisputably, irrefutably. In view of that, another dimension is also to look at economic reforms and policies. Indirectly, also end up addressing corruption. We also believe that one of the measures our government in power are going to do is that we have to look at ministers that have been appointed. We bring them to 40. Parliament will secure regulatory constitutional reforms to bring parliament numbers up to maximum 40. What you are going to do
is that...
Parliament? Yes, of course.
Okay.
We are going to do that.
How are you going to do that?
Because, for example, take China. China has a huge population. How many ministers are ruling them? They are not more than 60. China is big, has a huge population. How many ministers they have? It's not up to 40. If you go to some countries, they have ministers 25, 23. Ghana population is 30 million. We have ministers more than how many? 120 deputy ministers. Okay. We don't need those deputy ministers. So what we are thinking that we have to restructure. We have to take off ex gratia. So we make those money available for institutions that are serious, ready to fight corruption.
Okay.
We need to make those money available to CSOs who are ready to fight corruption. Government to make money available, funding for them, to hold us responsible. So at the close of the day, the public becomes happy that the CSOs are being funded by the government and holding government accountable. At the close of the day, resources will be made available to channel for development and needs of the country.
Okay. Ms. Anobi.
And finally,
okay. Briefly.
On a final point, we also realize that implementation and internalization of regulatory provisions are best applied when a ruling party is in power against the opposition. The ruling party want to internalize or put into practice the frameworks against the opposition. But we say no. We have to start from ourselves. Before you be appointed as a minister in GUM, first you have to declare your assets. We have to know your bank account. We have to know the assets you have. We have to know your money you have in account. We have to publish that. If you publish that, you'll be liable and be ready to be appointed as a minister. Then